My colloquium paper talks about how synthetic biology, this relatively new discipline or interdisciplinary field, emerged as one answer to what biology should be after the genome, which means after the sequencing of the Human Genome Project was completed around 2000, and suddenly there's this huge influx of genomic data into biology, and biologists are thinking about what to do with all that data. And so synthetic biology is a field that aims to make life easy to engineer. And in this paper, I show how the idea that the 21st century would be the century of biotechnology came together and helped to spur the emergence of synthetic biology through conversations between science fiction writers and biologists and engineers at the end of the 20th century. And I show how this idea about synthetic biology's goal of controlling life at a really small level and making bioengineering much more precise and predictable is actually connected to a larger narrative about the evolution of technology and the evolution of life and how those are connected in a very unpredictable manner. Yeah, I was a biology major as an undergrad, and this was around the time when evolutionary developmental biology was becoming a pretty big deal. And I started reading a lot of biologists and philosophers who were really critiquing genetic determinism, these models of genetic reductionism. Evo-Devo similarly was really complicating the central dogma of genetics, where we have one gene, one protein. And so the first time I heard about synthetic biology, I was immediately intrigued because it seems to be taking this very reductionist model of biology, this idea that we can just put some genes together, design an organism on a computer in this very additive way, and then kind of print it out and it will behave as we want. So when I saw that, I thought that that's a very kind of reductionist way of approaching biology that doesn't really fit with what we know about biological complexity as that's emerged more recently. But then I came to see that synthetic biology wasn't just taking that model, that kind of reductionist model, as a way of explaining life, but it was actually changing biology to fit the model. And so I was kind of blown away by that. And I wanted to see how that research program would play out. So in this paper, I am looking at scientific papers from the systems and the synthetic biology literature. A lot of them kind of foundational papers that are laying out the programs for these fields that are emerging around the year 2000. So for example, Drew Endy's Foundations for Engineering Biology, that came out in 2005. Then I also look at the conference proceedings for these after the genome conferences that were hosted by the Molecular Sciences Institute in the late 1990s. And I also look at papers, articles, and novels that were written by science fiction authors and were read by these early synthetic biologists. So in the broader project, I use science fiction. I look at science fiction novels to see how people have imagined biotechnologies fitting into larger social systems. And I find that a lot of times narratives about biotechnology are stories about the relationship between life and technology in a particular social system, like under capitalism. As I was conducting this research, I noticed that there were some kind of images or tropes that overlap between that I would see, and I noticed from a science fiction novel that then I would hear repeated by a synthetic biologist, like the idea that in the future people are going to live in programmable gourds, giant pumpkin houses that we've engineered. And so I discovered that the scientists at the Molecular Sciences Institute, as they were coming up with the idea of synthetic biology, they were reading science fiction and conversing with science fiction authors. And so part of the analysis is looking at those specific authors, such as Rudy Rucker, Greg Bear, that actually were part of what I call this thought collective, a group of people that were all exchanging ideas about how biology would be the technology of the 21st century. So besides discovering that many synthetic biologists were big sci-fi fans, I think another thing that surprised me a lot was how big a role the military and DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, played in the emergence of synthetic biology. So meetings organized by DARPA were really crucial in bringing together the key players in synthetic biology. And there's also a sci-fi military connection too, where military strategists are also looking to science fiction authors to help them imagine future threats coming from biotechnology. So I describe these science fiction writers, the synthetic biologists, and military officials, DARPA program officials, as all kind of part of this thought collective.